this great method that a student taught me on how to find greatest common factors and least common multiples that I would like to share. Let's say you want to find the greatest common divisor, they call it in this book, which is also the same thing as the greatest common factor, and the least common multiple, which is also known as the least common denominator when it happens to be in the bottom of a fraction. Same number, it's just the location, it's just how it's being used. People mix these up all the time. When you look at greatest common divisor or factor, both a divisor and a factor are things that go in. They go into evenly. So your common factors are the biggest numbers, the greatest number that will go into both numbers. Your least common multiple or your least common denominator, if it happens to be something you're going to put in the bottom of a fraction. Don't look at least so much as look at these. A multiple of a number is what you get when you multiply that number. So the multiples of a number are that number times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, so on and so forth. These are multiples of both numbers or of a number or whatever. Typically what we're trying to do in finding the greatest common factor is to find the biggest factor they have in common, which is going to be no bigger than the smaller one. And the least common multiple is the smallest multiple that they have in common, that they share. You wouldn't ever say the least common factor because that's always going to be 1 for anything. And you wouldn't say the biggest common multiple because that's going to be infinity. So let's look at a couple of examples. If they want us to find the greatest common divisor and the least common multiple of, say, 24 and 36. The way that the student taught me how to do this was to write both numbers in a row, put them in a box like this, and then ask yourself what number will go into both of those. So we could start with just 2. It doesn't have to be prime numbers, it can be. Okay, divide 24 by 2, and that's going to give us 12. If we divide 36 by 2, that's going to give us 18. Do it again. 2 will still go into both of these. They're even numbers. So 2 goes into 12 6 times, 2 goes into 18 9 times. Now 2 won't go into 9, but 3 will go into both of these. So if I divide by 3, 3 goes into 6 2 times, 3 goes into 9 3 times. Nothing will go into both 2 and 3, so I'm done. Now, These are common factors. These are numbers that went into both of these. So your greatest common factor is what you get when you multiply these together, when you combine all of these. So it's going to be 2 times 2 times 3, which is 2 times 3 is 4 times 3 is 12. So 12 is the biggest number that will go into both 24 and 36, which is really obvious once you know what it is, but it's not so obvious before that. The least common multiple is going to be all of these times all of these. So that's going to be 2 times 2 times 3, this column, times 2 times 3, this row. 24 is actually 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 2. 36 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So in order to be a multiple of 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, it has to have 3 2s and 1 3. This. In order to be a multiple of 36, it has to be it has to contain 2 times 2 times 3 times 3, which would be 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And in any case, this is 12 times 6 is 72. So the least common multiple is 72. If you need the prime factorization, we also have that here to look at. Since 24 is going to be 2 times 2 times 3 times 2, then that would be 2 cubed times 3 if they want you to write it in exponential form. 36 is 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. So 36 is 2 squared times 3 squared. Another way, once you get them factored, to find the common divisor or common factor. The common factor, the greatest common factor, has to have the factors they have in common, each of which will be raised to the smallest exponent you see. So the smallest exponent on a 2 is 2, and the smallest exponent on a 3, this is an invisible 1, is 1. So 2 squared is 4 times 3 is 12. Your common multiple, which has to be bigger, will have every factor that you see at all. Of course, they both have the same factors, but it has the biggest exponent you see. So the 2 is going to be cubed. The 3 is going to be squared. So this is 2 cubed is 8 times 9 is 72. So that's another way to do it. This kind of just gets them both factored at the same time, and it sorts out their common factors versus the ones they don't have in common. So let's try it one more time. How about 540 and 600? Now, since these are so big, maybe I won't start with 2. How about 10? 540 divided by 10 will be 54. 60 divided by 10 will be 60. 6 will go into both of those. 6 into 54 is 9. 6 into 60 is 10. This is done because there's no more factors in common. So the greatest common factor or divisor is going to be 10 times 6, 60. And the least common multiple will be 10 times 6 times 9 times 10, which is 54 times 100 is 5,400. The factorizations, 540 is 10 times 6 times 9, which should be 2 times 5 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3, not 33, which should be 2 squared times 3 cubed times 5. Prime factorization of 60, so 600, is going to be 10 times 6 times 10. So 2 times 3 times 2 times 5 times 2 times 5 is going to be 2, 1, 2, 3 cubed times 1, 3 times a couple of 5s. And again, you can use this again to get the least common factor, which will be the common factors with the smallest exponents, the greatest, the least common multiple is going to be every factor with the biggest exponents. So what about the problems where you've got 3 numbers? Now, I tried this out with a student just a while ago and did it in hopes that we could do all 3 of these at once. Didn't work. So, to get your GCF or your GCD for 3 numbers, you have to get the GCF for 2, then get the GCF of that GCF and the 3rd number. To get the least common multiple for 3. You have to get the least common multiple for any 2 of them. And you can accomplish both of these 2 things at the same time. But then you have to get the least common multiple of that least common multiple in the 3rd number. So you can't get it all in one shot. So if we do the 120 and the 90, let's see, they'll both divide by 10. Going to be 12 and 9. These will both divide by 3. That'll be 4 and 3. So that's done. So the GCF of these 2 is going to be 30. And the least common multiple is going to be 30 times 12 is 360. To get the greatest common factor between these 2 and the 84, we need to find the greatest common factor between the 30 and the 84. If I divide by 2, let's see, that's going to be 15 and 42. And those will divide by 3, 5 and 14. No common factor here. So the greatest common factor of all 3, greatest common factor is the first column here. So it's 2 times 3 is 6. But to get the least common multiple for all 3, I need the least common multiple of the first 2, which is 360, and then use the 84. Didn't leave room to divide those, so let me come over here. So 360 and 84 will both divide, oh gosh, by, well, I know they'll go by 4. That would be 90 and 21. And those will both divide by 3, 30 and 7. Nothing in common between 30 and 7. So the least common multiple is going to be 4 times 3 times 30 times 7, which comes out to 2,520. So you have to do the least common multiple for 3 separate from doing the greatest common factor from 3. But it still works out pretty good. And you can still use this to break things down into their common factors. For instance, the 120 and the 90 are both done over here. 120 is going to be 2 times 5 times 3 times 2 times 2. 2 times 5 for the 10 times 3 for the 3 times 4 is 2 times 2. 90 is going to be 10 times 3, or 2 times 5 times 3 times another 3. And then 84, well, 84 was 2 times 3 times 14. So that's going to be 2 times 3 times 14 is 2 times 7. So we've also got the common the factorizations of all of these. Well, greatest common factors here, least common multiples down here. So that's how you do those. You don't have to have a lot of different ways to do them. You just have to have one way reliably to do them. So it's not as bad as it looks. You can always use your calculator to see if something will divide by 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever. And you know, you can generously use your calculator to help break these down. You don't have to do a lot of math in your head. Let me know if you have any more problems, and I will talk to you later.